An Inquisitor is a secret intelligence agent and the highest-ranking member of the Holy Orders of the Emperor's Inquisition, the galaxy-spanning secret police force of the Imperium of Man. The Inquisitor enjoys one of the most privileged jobs in the entire galaxy, yet they are far from the masters of their own fate. Their life is bound to the duty and responsibility of securing and protecting the Imperium of Man from the taints of chaos, xenos, and mutants. Inquisitors not only guard the realm of man from the many outside threats that exist in the galaxy, they must also keep a watchful eye on the enemies within. Such a monumental task cannot be done without wielding immense power, and that is exactly what an Inquisitor is granted once he obtains his inquisitorial rosette, and takes on the duty to purge the galaxy of all threats to the Imperium of Man. If he has good cause, an Inquisitor may demand any service from any Imperial citizen, up to and including the High Lords of Terra. They have absolute power to judge and execute supposed heretics, with no appeal except the intervention of another Inquisitor. Practically all possible verdicts are death sentences, although the means by which they are achieved is different. Traitors, the worst grade of offenders, are considered irredeemable and will be quickly executed. Heretics may be redeemed, often after considerable amounts of torture, and may receive absolution through death in the service of the Imperium. This service may consist of conscription into the Imperial armies, becoming an operator of one of the Adeptus Minotorum's penitent engines, or in cases of penitent psychers, may be sent to Holy Terra to become new psychic fuel for the Golden Throne. The Inquisitor's power is so great that if a world is subject to extreme corruption by chaos, an Inquisitor has the power to call down the verdict of exterminatus, destroying the entire ecosystem of the planet and rendering the world completely lifeless. Inquisitors have infiltrated every facade of human society to ensure that chaos can never again take root in the Imperium, and that no alien race will replace humanity as the dominant intelligent species in the Milky Way galaxy. To better understand the Inquisitor, we must look at individual, notable Inquisitors throughout the Imperium's history. Tain Masada is a demon hunter, an Imperial Inquisitor of the Ordo Malleus, the Holy Ordo of the Inquisition, charged with safeguarding the Imperium of Man from all demonic servants of chaos. Once considered a rising star within the Ordo, Masada's latest actions have branded him a dangerous radical, but so far, none of his colleagues have called for his censure. Most of Masada's past remains a mystery. It is unknown where Masada was born, or even whose apprentice he was before reaching the rank of Inquisitor. However, this Inquisitor and his retinue are famous for repeatedly clashing with the Dark Apostle, Varrock Lore, also known as that which dwells in darkness, the leader of the Scribe Blade warbands of the Word-Bearers Astartes, which ravaged 8 separate Imperial worlds in the late 41st millennium. On the industrial world of Donatos Primus, Inquisitor Mata witnessed the Word-Bearers and their local allies spark a planetary revolt, with almost half of the world's planetary defense force turning renegade. Unable to prevent the rebellion from gaining momentum, the Inquisitor let Segmentum authorities order the Imperium's armed forces to reconquer Donatos Primus. During the war, Inquisitor Mata's interests were drawn by 2 previously loyal houses of knights from the world of Adrestopol, House Chimeros and House Wyvorn. They joined the rebellion and betrayed their allies, nearly causing the collapse of the Imperial efforts to reclaim Donatos Primus. For House Chimeros, it seemed that they had been corrupted by another unknown servant of that which dwells in the darkness, the witch Alicia Car Manticos. The victory on Donatos complicated Masada's mission when Varrock Lore was killed by a newly elected High King of Adrestopol, Daniel Tandraconis, and the Freeblade known as the Knight of Ashes. Worse yet, the demon's agents were able to flee the planet, leaving Masada with nowhere to begin his investigation except for the witch's homeworld, Adrestopol. As an inquisitorial survey of the purity of the remaining night houses of the night world was required, Masada used his influence and his proximity to the planet to have himself appointed as the Inquiry's inquisitorial envoy. This official mission would serve as a cover to further his own secret goals. Traveling to the nearby Majestus system at the head of a small fleet led by the Orbian-class battleship Light of Truth, Masada infiltrated the night world, spying on the remaining loyalist night houses, even as they tore down the seats of their traitorous brethren and purified their lands with the help of the Adeptus Ministorum. Upon the High King's orders, The lands of the renegade houses were shunned, and armed men, drawn from the household armies of the 3 loyalist houses, patrolled the ruins of the renegades' fortresses. It took 4 Terran years for Masada to create enough contacts to gain entry to the ruins of Camaro Keep, House Camaro's bastion, a location where the Inquisitor rightly suspected a hive of Chaos cultists lay. Before the Inquisitor and his retinue could investigate the ruins any further, they lost all contact with their local partners, who were killed by the mutants and beastmen eking out a living in the subterranean burrows under the keep. Forced to reveal his presence to the loyal night houses, Inquisitor Masada sought a way to make the High King more inclined to help him. That solution presented itself when the Orc Horde of Walk Killfist began pillaging Imperial worlds. Thanks to an efficient campaign of hit-and-run attacks, the Light of Truth and her small fleet rerouted the Wall to Adrestopol, deliberately initiating the conflict known as the Second Orc War. Having secretly already condemned Adrestopol to exterminatus, Masada staged his arrival as Fate's messenger, warning the High King of the Orcs' imminent invasion and using his official status to secure a small escort and a means of transportation to travel to the keep. In the keep, Masada battled the Chaos cult established in the ruins of the Chimera Keep and was able to retrieve a blasphemous tome of arcane knowledge which he believed contained the hints to the true name of that which dwells in darkness. Leaving his escorts behind on a fake surveillance mission, the Inquisitor's planned extraction back to his flagship failed when his landcrawler came under attack by a roaming warband of orcs, who trapped the Inquisitor far from the Aquila lander his retinue had hidden in the wilderness. Eventually he was saved by the arrival of the Imperial Knights under First Knight Jenica Tan Draconis of House Draconis, a knight Masada had betrayed and left for dead in the burrows beneath the keep. The Inquisitor was forced to reevaluate his position. Knowing full well he had abused his power and marked loyal warriors of the Imperium for death, and further humbled by the actions of Jenica Tan Draconis, who fell to her knees and submitted to his judgment as a loyal servant of the Emperor, Masada had a change of heart and countermanded his order for exterminatus of the Night World. In the wake of the Imperial victory over the Orcs, Inquisitor Masada officially declared the warriors of Adrestopol to be pure and loyal subjects of the Emperor. Thanks to the vital information gathered by the Knight of Ashes, Masada had learned the location of Alicia Car Manticos, the only remaining servant of that which dwells in the darkness. But with the witch having fled into the Eye of Terror, she was beyond his reach. Using his authority as an Inquisitor, Masada called for a full-fledged Imperial crusade in his quest to finally destroy the demon that had plagued the Imperium for so long. Masada had many acolytes who accompanied him on his mission to Adrestopol. He gathered a sizable retinue to support him in his work. Shainma and Shimara were 2 death cult assassins employed by Masada, both women who never displayed their faces and wore form-fitting black body gloves. While undoubtedly the most deadly of Masada's retinue in close combat, both assassins were unfortunately killed on Adrestopol. The oldest member of the retinue was Linguist Mortens, a tech savant who specialized in the decryption of old and forgotten text. His cognitator assistant brain also made Mortens a highly precise calculator of variables. The Jacaro, known as Duboko, is Masada's technical specialist and carried numerous small technological marvels that could help Masada's team in their missions. Stronger than an average human, the Jacaro's technological skills vastly surpassed those of the Adeptus Mechanicus. In firefights, Duboko was more than able to defend himself thanks to the powerful Jacaro-built digital weapons. Unfortunately, Duboko was severely wounded in the subterranean networks of caves and crypts beneath the keep. While being the weakest member of Masada's retinue in physical terms, the Astropath, Vanquist's psychic gifts, made him invaluable to the team's missions. Usually clad in long robes of deep blue and clutching a staff of office, Vanquist was a tall, slender, and pale figure. Having served Masada for several Terran years, Vanquist was not only in charge of the Inquisitor's off-world communication, but also had learned how to channel his gifts to follow and track the corruption of chaos, a faculty that proved particularly useful in the location of the ritual space of chaos cults, or tracking down items of arcane power. In the unmapped warrens of the caves stretching beneath the keep, the group relied on Vanquist's ability to guide them through their final objective. Whatever the inquisitorial party encountered there left Vanquis in a catatonic state. He needed to be carried back to his landcrawler as the Inquisitor tried to escape the doomed world. Sadly, Astropath Vanquis was subsequently killed when the team's transport was attacked by orcs. Kazarkin Sergeant Caston doubled as the retinue's pilot and muscle. Formerly of the Cadian 85th Infantry Regiment, Sergeant Caston met Masada on a joint mission on the world of Halen, where the Kazarkin Sergeant saved the Inquisitor's life. Caston usually ventured into the field while being equipped with his thick carapace armor and his hell gun. He also knew how to handle various shuttles and astropathic aircraft, though he had no experience in aerial combat. The brutish interrogator Nash is Masada's apprentice and diligently serves his master. In combat, the interrogator usually wears a suit of bronze carapace armor and wields a bolt pistol, though his main task is to monitor the Auspex. A resilient fighter, Interrogator Nash's face has been beaten so often that other members of Masada's retinue more or less openly referred to him as the Ogryn's punching bag. While Nesh suffered a broken arm in the fierce fighting beneath the keep, he survived the mission to Adrestopol and continued to fight alongside his master. Gideon Ravenor was an Inquisitor of the Ordo Xenos, and one of the Inquisition's most powerful psychers. Gideon Ravenor was born in the year 304 of the 41st millennium. His planet of origin is unknown, though due to the Inquisition's strict recruitment standards for psychers, Ravenor was likely indoctrinated at the Adeptus Astra Telepathicus Scholicia Psychana from childhood. As a young man, Ravenor was assigned by the Ordo Xenos as an interrogator in the infamous Inquisitor Gregor Eisenhorn. In time, Eisenhorn came to regard Ravenor as his foremost pupil and the ideal Inquisitor. One of his early missions was his effort to silence Zygmunt Moloch, a heretic from the dangerous Cognitai, a chaos cult disguised as an academy in the Scaris sector. Moloch was appointed by the Cognitai's Madame Chase to be a part of the Cognitai's Ordion's team to help with a venture involving setting up several arcane mechanisms on the Sleef outer world intended to capture and control warp energy. The planet was covered in thousands of plasma vents that contained the energies of the warp and which the Cognitai devices could capture and store. Ravenor and his team caught up with the Chaos cultists and stopped them. Ravenor assumed Moloch, who was the lone remaining survivor of the Cognitai operatives, was dead after he threw himself into one of the plasma vents. What Ravenor did not know was that Moloch had been teleported to the starship October Country moments before his death, though he had been burnt very badly by the plasma, and his face had been largely disfigured by the burns. During his time as an interrogator in Eisenhorn's retinue of acolytes, Ravenor enjoyed a long relationship with a Carthenian swordswoman. This love affair came to a swift halt when the woman was slain by a Dark Eldar homunculus from the cabal of the Fell Witch during the cleansing of a xenophile cult on the world of Leth 6. Shortly after his grave personal tragedy, Ravenor participated alongside his master in a great triumph on the world of Tharician Primus to celebrate the success of the Ophidian Crusade. Due to the machinations of the radical Inquisitor Quissos, the triumph ended in blood-soaked horror when the parade was attacked by the Chaos-influenced aerospace fighters and 33 Alpha and Alpha Plus rogue psychers, whom were freed from their holding tanks. Eisenhorn escaped unharmed thanks to the demonic intervention of the warp entity Cherubale, who saw future potential in Eisenhorn's existence. Ravenor, on the other hand, was horrifically crippled, suffering third-degree burns over the entirety of his body, and he was reduced to a barely animated shell. Unable to speak or even move, he had to be consigned to an enclosed force chair, unable to survive without the chair's elaborate life support system to sustain him, and incapable of physical interaction with his environment except through his chair's auto-senses and voice synthesizers. Though physically incapacitated, Ravenor's psychic abilities flourished, despite or perhaps because of his injuries and sensory deprivation. Thanks to this psychic power, Ravenor was still able to continue his service to the Inquisition, and after his health had stabilized, he was promoted to a full Inquisitor status on the recommendation of Gregor Eisenhorn. In the year 402 of the 41st millennium, Ravenor and his team investigated the illegal trade in warp-tainted glass, so-called Flex, which had surfaced as a drug on the hive world of Ustius Majoris. After a long and perilous inquiry, Ravenor discovered that the Fleck trade was just a byproduct of a far greater conspiracy. The government of Subsector Angulus had hired a cartel of rogue traders to illegally import high-powered cognitators from the desolate and heavily warp-tainted Vinicius subsector. These chaos-infused machines were then used to crack Enuncia, the fundamental control code of the universe. With the right command words and the empowered patterns he had laid down in the architecture of Ustius's Major's hive cities, the condemned heretic Theodore Kadsky, the lord of the subsector Moloch, planned to make himself into a godlike demonic being. The lord governor of the subsector, Oskar Ludov Bazar, and the chief provost Jader Trice were in charge of the plot, and they made use of the magisterium's interior cases to enforce the plot's security and make sure the truth of what they were planning did not reach unwanted ears. In truth, the governor was actually Moloch, Gideon Ravenor's old enemy. In the attempt to activate the mechanism that was actually the city of Petropolis, Moloch used the Enuncia to restore his ravaged body. Ravenor once again thwarted him, but not exactly as he planned. Ironically, the Flecks, which spread only because of the greed of the government's hired traders, was what made Moloch's master plan fail. Ravenor's vain interrogator, Carl Thonius, who had become addicted to the Flecks during the investigation, happened upon a fleet which contained the essence of an unimaginable powerful demon called Slight. Step by step, and without Ravenor's knowledge, Slight manifested itself through Thonius, a process that granted the interrogator terrible powers. Only the intervention of the possessed Thonius allowed Ravenor's team to foil Moloch's plan, and the heretic was forced to flee. Thonius successfully contained the demon within himself for a long time, but during Ravenor's final confrontation with Moloch on Gundrun in the year 404 of the 41st millennium, Slight finally manifested itself fully, and thereby destroying the body and the soul of Carl Thonius. Only the combined powers of Ravenor and Moloch, aided by the stable warp power and psychic sorcery, allowed the team to banish the demon back to the realm of chaos. Afterwards, Ravenor executed Moloch for his crimes against the Emperor, and turned himself over to the Inquisition, confessing everything. After a long and thorough interrogation and purification process, Ravenor was acquitted of any chaotic taint, but his good reputation was forever soiled, and he was for the rest of his career, as he was labeled as the radical by the Puritan peers in the Inquisition. He was retired from the Inquisition for a time, though he eventually was placed back into active service to hunt down and sanction his former mentor, Eisenhorn. Whether he has succeeded in this endeavor is still unknown. In his early years as an Inquisitor, Ravenor subscribed to the more radical inquisitorial philosophical sects and One Mind Syndicate. He has been known to cooperate with worthy aliens and to use his psychic abilities to predict the future. Some years after the disaster on Thracian Primus, Ravenor even apprenticed himself to an unknown Eldar Farseer to learn divination. The knowledge and allies he gained through this pact made it possible for him and Eisenhorn to defeat the Arch-Traitor Pontius Glon on the planet 5213X, and thereby, according to the Farseer, save the galaxy and the Imperium of Man from utter destruction. In time, Ravenor's stance towards divination seemed to change. During his investigation of the Contract 13 cartel on Ustius Majoris, he claimed to loathe Farseeing because of the confusing and madness-inducing aspects of the resulting prophecies. It is unclear when Ravenor changed his view, but his newfound aversion did not stop him from using Eldar artifacts, or from trusting prophetic visions when they presented themselves. Despite his often unorthodox methods and powerful psychic ability, Ravenor was for a long time seen as a Puritan by the political factions within the Inquisition. This view was probably a product of Ravenor's published philosophical works and his reclusive lifestyle. Inquisitors are by their very nature subtle, cryptic, and enigmatic. Most wear this mystery around themselves like a cloak. The same could be said about Valain Ramius, the mysterious Inquisitor of the Ordo Xenos, and the leader of the faction of the Death Watch, known as the Dead Cabal. Little of certainty is known about this woman, though her credentials are of the highest order, and as a result, her authority amongst the Death Watch is all but limitless. None remember the details of her arrival in the Jericho Reach, though most assume that the Inquisitor rode in on the first wave of the Aculus Crusade, as few can recall her presence before that time. If asked directly about her service with the Death Watch, the stalwarts of Watch Fortress Arioch react with puzzlement. Back through the centuries, scattered amongst the recollection of the older members of the Death Watch, are memories of a woman bearing her description, though no official records exist as evidence. It is almost as if though she has always been there, but went unnoticed until the last several decades. Beyond her inquisitorial rosette and her authentication seal, no concrete records exist of her before the discovery of the Jericho Reach warp gate leading to the edge of the Calixtus sector. Despite this lack, the Echo Chamber of Vigilance has reconciled her credentials and required no other confirmation of her devotion. Since her arrival, Inquisitor Ramius has proven to be like many of her kind, not one for sloth or inactivity. In but a few short standard years, she has taken command of the Dead Station and collected about her the 4 members of the Death Watch who would become known collectively as the Dead Cabal. With her trusted battle brothers positioned throughout the Jericho Reach and watchful of unusual phenomena and dire warning signs, the Inquisitor set about her own work, though what this is few can say. The few times she has made her actions widely known, it was to provide evidence that the things which lurk between the stars of the Jericho Reach are stirring, and to demand that the Death Watch take action against them. Perhaps due to her intense secrecy and unwillingness to disclose what she has learned, these warnings and demands have largely fallen on deaf ears. As a result, Inquisitor Ramius spends little time actually aboard the watch station of the Death Watch, and rarely, if ever, enters the confines of Watch Fortress Arioch. Despite her routine absence, she has a reputation for suddenly appearing where she is most needed, and vanishing just as abruptly when the situation has passed. A habit that does little to inspire trust amongst her fellows. She has a habit of finishing the sentences of others and responding to their actions before they even happen, almost as if though she knows what one is about to say or do before they do it. Some speculate that this shows the Inquisitor possesses some psychic talent. Other highly learned scholars and adepts amongst the Death Watch whisper even more mysterious explanations, perhaps even a connection to the obscure Ordo Coronis. What Ramius' true purpose is, not even the members of the Dead Cabal can accurately say. Many amongst the Death Watch suspect that the outspoken Inquisitor knows a great deal more about what's going on in the Jericho Reach than she lets on, and a few accuse her of outright sabotage and treason. She does little to acknowledge these accusations, simply dismissing them as idle chatter of those who spend too little time taking action against the doom which lies at the doorstep of the Imperium. These days, the Inquisitor leaves the matters of the Dead Cabal to those who she trusts. Watch Captain Matthias. Some speculated that the lack of recorded information concerning Ramius is due to a cover-up of the highest order, that perhaps all record of her has been expunged to conceal her place in a great conspiracy, or to obscure her part in a failed operation. Others suspect that she is not who she says she is, and that the Chamber of Vigilance has placed undue trust on this mysterious Inquisitor. True paranoics amongst the Inquisition even claim to have evidence that the Inquisitor is in fact a highly trained operative of the Officio Sicinorum, sent to infiltrate the Death Watch until the day when her murderous arts shall be called upon. Whispers between these skeptics claim that Ramius has learned the use of polymorphine from the Calidus Temple assassins, and uses the transformative shape-shifting drug to take the form of any number of individuals throughout the Death Watch in the Jericho Reach, thus explaining her mysterious coming and goings. For her part, Ramius does little to quell these rumors or explain herself, leaving her brethren to speculate, while she prepares the Imperial holdings in the Jericho Reach against what is to come. In recent years, Inquisitor Ramius has become more active than ever before. She travels the Jericho Reach by her usual unknown means, passing from one dead world to the next with a haste and an urgency that has drawn the attention of the Battle Brothers stationed aboard the Dead Station. Where once she acted entirely alone, she has recently led several separate excursions to the worlds of the Dark Pattern. Some of these missions end in conflict and bloodshed, as the Inquisitor and her chosen escorts unearth slumbering horrors of these worlds. Others, prepared for similar action, find only dead rocks and barren wastes, almost as if the Inquisitor were expecting some event that had yet to happen. Recently, Inquisitor Ramius has been conferring closely with Night Warden Alric, though the subject of those conversations remains unknown. Given their shared preference for working alone out amongst the scattered worlds of the Dark Pattern, such discussions suggest a discovery which may have dire implications for the Jericho Reach. As well, these interactions give some credence to the long-standing suspicion that the Inquisitor and the mysterious Black Shield have a connection to one another prior to their time in the Death Watch. Gregor Eisenhorn is one of the Imperium's most famous Inquisitors of the Ordo Xenos, one of the Inquisition's subdivisions, sometimes referred to as the Alien Hunters. Like many members of the Inquisition, Eisenhorn was a strict Puritan, a member of a faction within the Inquisition itself that believes that the Imperium as it stands is valid, divinely ordained, and worth fighting for. Therefore, Eisenhorn and all Puritan Inquisitors strive to maintain the current balance of power and the structure of the Imperium's military, church, and state. In their heart, events are unfolding as the Emperor had foreseen, and to force change in his name is a sign of supreme arrogance, for who can truly claim to know the will of the Emperor? Eventually, Eisenhorn would leave this ideology behind and adopt the more radical Xanathite belief, a set of doctrines that preach that the war and its denizens are things to be enslaved rather than denied. Eisenhorn would come to believe that chaos is no less an enemy that must be fought and defeated, but one ultimately that should be tamed, bound to humanity's will, and put to use in the Imperium service. Eisenhorn is several centuries old, yet roughly looks middle-aged due to his inquisitorial rejuvenant treatment. A powerful sanctioned psyker, Eisenhorn possesses considerable natural willpower and resolve, which combined with his pool of psychic powers, make him a potent telepath. He normally channels this psychic talent through his voice, compelling people to follow his instructions. Once clean-shaven and dark-haired, Eisenhorn was forced to permanently shave his head, accepting a crude augmetic assistance system, which can be seen projecting from the back of his head and encasing his lower limbs, which allow him to reasonably move, but he has taken to using a sword stick to aid him in his balance. He normally wears sober suits of dark gray or black under long blue or black high-collared coats. Underneath the coat could once be found his sword, sheathed to his hip. It is now fashioned into the sword stick, with a scabbard forming a walking cane. Born on Decair's world, Gregor Eisenhorn was taken at a very young age by the dreaded Black Ships, those ancient vessels that travel the stars collecting psychers, blanks, and just about anyone deemed worthy of becoming significant in the Imperium. In time, he became an acolyte of Inquisitor Habshund, where he studied alongside fellow Inquisition apprentice Titus Endor, and was elevated to the rank of full Inquisitor at the incredibly young age of 24. Carving out a stable and competent career, Eisenhorn eventually found himself being drawn into the events that would change the course of his life forever. During this time, Eisenhorn succeeded in ending the menace of the mass murderer, Murden Iclone, an investigation that is notable not only for bringing Goodwin Fishing and Elizabeth Beckwin into his employment as acolytes, but also for setting him in pursuit of both Pontius Glaw and the Necrotech. Following leads from the Iclone investigation, Eisenhorn became tangled up with a heretical cabal in the world of Good Run, and in fact was briefly captured and tortured by one of its members, Gorgon Locke. The cabal was eventually broken by a full inquisitorial purge, led by Inquisitor Voke. Eisenhorn was able to recover a device known as the Pontius from the cabal, and it later transpired that this device held the encoded brain engrams of the infamous and long-dead heretic Pontius Glaw, one of the Cabal's schemes that involved arranging his resurrection. Eisenhorn held Pontius Glaw captive and interrogated him regularly, before finally choosing to have the Pontius device incarcerated by Magos Bureau of the Adeptus Mechanicus. This decision would ultimately have a profound effect on Eisenhorn's future. Following up further leads from the Cabal Purge led Eisenhorn into one of his most famous investigations, the affair of the Necrotech, a tome of chaos knowledge. Eisenhorn tracked the survivors of the heretical Good Run Cabal to a colony world inhabited by the Xenos, known as the Ceruthi. The Ceruthi had come into the possession of the copy of the Necrotech and had translated it into their own language, creating creating two versions of this powerful Chaos Tome and translating tool. The human Necrotech Tome, written in High Gothic, was quickly found and destroyed by Eisenhorn himself. Some radical Inquisitors deemed this a heretical act and damned Eisenhorn for it. However, the majority of the local inquisitorial conclaves, which was dominated by Puritans, supported Eisenhorn's decision to burn the tome, outvoting the radicals. Eisenhorn was therefore spared from censure and was in fact instrumental in planning a raid on the Ceruthi homeworld, during which the remaining tainted items were destroyed. It was during this attack that Eisenhorn also first met Cherubel, a powerful demon host who would plague Eisenhorn and the Imperium in later endeavors. The following year, Eisenhorn investigated the apparent ritual murders on the world of Samter, at first believing the killings to be the work of some chaos cult. Soon, however, it was revealed that the culprits were actually ex-soldiers of the Astra Militarum. These former soldiers of Samter's 9th Infantry Regiment had been driven mad by the horrors they had faced in war and were ritually killing regular citizens. Backed by the arbitrators of the local Adeptus Arbites, Eisenhorn managed to corner and eliminate the fanaticals in an abandoned and decaying building. During this resulting firefight, Eisenhorn lost his left hand to an experienced former sharpshooter. He was offered a bionic prosthetic but declined, making do with a fused stump until he could have a vat-grown hand grafted 2 years later. Years later, Eisenhorn's best friend and acolyte, Midas Benticor, was killed by the heretic Fade Thuring during an investigation. Thuring escaped, and Eisenhorn promised to keep a watchful eye on Midas's infant daughter, Medea. Years later, when she came of age, she would follow the path of her father and join the retinue of Inquisitor Eisenhorn as his pilot. 26 Terran years later, Eisenhorn began the investigation that he would become most famous for across the Imperium, the elimination of the heretic Inquisitor, Quizos. The investigation took place in the aftermath of a disaster of the Thracian Primaris Triumph, an atrocity that appeared to have been engineered to free several Alpha Plus rogue trader psychers from Imperial detention. Eisenhorn's investigation took him to the world of Echan, where posing as mutants, he and his team discovered that there were inquisitorial collusions in the scheme that had freed the rogue psychers. Inquisitor Lyco was discovered in the company of the demon host Cherubel. Taken aback by the reappearance of Cherubel, Eisenhorn focused his investigation upon the creature. This led him to the fortress world of Cadia, where he discovered another demon host, profanity, and ties between these demon hosts and the missing radical Inquisitor Quizos. However, Eisenhorn's investigation was sidelined for some time by his arrest by Inquisitor Ozma for allegedly consorting with the demons. Escaping, he was declared outcast by the Inquisition and forced to operate as a rogue for the remainder of the investigation. Eisenhorn sojourned with his Adeptus Mechanicus associate, Magus Bure, on the world of Sincaire, where he conferred with his prisoner, Pontius Glaw. During this period, he defeated a chaos cult that existed on the world and gained master-crafted force weapons. Eisenhorn next assembled a small strike team of 3 other Inquisitors, and acting in concert with them, tracked down and confronted the renegade Inquisitor Quizos. Eisenhorn himself was the one who killed Quizos, recovering his heretical book, the Malleus Codicium, and banished both profanity and Cherubel to the warp. Eisenhorn was cleared of all charges against him at the conclusion of the investigation. Ironically, years later, Eisenhorn succeeded in secretly summoning the demon Cherubel and trapping him in the physical universe for interrogation and study. He dealt with the minor warp incursions of demons in Gudrun thereafter. Towards the end of his honorable career, Eisenhorn was able to avenge the death of Midas Benticor, but it came at a considerable cost. Killing the heretic Thuring cost him the lives of several associates, placed Bequin in a coma, and it resulted in the destruction of his personal starship, his gun cutter, and forced him to use the demon Cherubel as an ally. Now, to control Cherubel, Eisenhorn sacrificed the naive Puritan Inquisitor Bastian Vervac in an improvised chaos ritual. This foul misdeed was an important step on Eisenhorn's road to damnation. Shortly afterwards, Eisenhorn was the victim of a carefully planned attack orchestrated by Pontius Glaw, who had escaped the Inquisition's captivity and decided to punish and torment his captors. Almost every facade of Eisenhorn's life was brought crashing down around him, including his career, as he was once again declared an outcast by Inquisitor Ozma and Haldane. His organization shattered, his own body broken, and much of his retinue dead, Eisenhorn was eventually able to call on aid from his former pupil, Gideon Ravenor, who was now a full Inquisitor. With Ravenor's assistance, Eisenhorn was able to track Pontius down and eliminate him for good. However, the Pontius affair did more than deplete Eisenhorn's physical resources. It also finally broke down his resistance to employing radical methods of fighting chaos and the Imperium's other enemies. He began to travel with Cherubel as his constant companion. Eisenhorn largely dropped out of sight after the Pontius affair, despite his outcast status apparently being removed once again by the Inquisition. He has reappeared for only brief moments in the years following, to recruit new acolytes or confer with past associates, such as warning Gideon Ravenor about the intentions of the chaos cult known as the Divine Fraternity. Later, members of the cult discussed Eisenhorn and suggested that he had been killed fighting their followers, as he was inside a building that was bombed, and Eisenhorn subsequently vanished from their psychic foresight. The truth of his death can be disputed. And those were 40 facts on the Inquisitors of the Imperium. This was Gershwin with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.
Always used to put my freedom first in any situation.